Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And about 2 years ago, we confronted Bill Morneau, the finance minister here in Canada, about how he sold off the rest of Canada's gold, and we kind of talked about Venezuela, which, eerily enough, had more gold than Canada. It still has more gold than Canada. Yeah, and we're looking at a hyperinflationary scenario in Venezuela. Well, they have more gold than Canada. But that won't be for too long because, as the Zero Hedge article says, Venezuela's gold liquidation accelerates. We'll be out of gold in 1 year. And to provide some context, I'll just go into the fact that Erdogan has decided that there will be, in Turkey, a centralized gold standard, and he's repatriating a whole bunch of gold from the New York Federal Reserve. And this is reminiscent of something that we saw in Venezuela a few years ago, as Hugo Chavez, right before he died, decided to repatriate a whole bunch of its gold from central banks around the world where it was held. And going into this article a bit, it says, conveniently last week, Russ Dallin of Caracas Capital wrote to inform his clients what Venezuela has been doing over the course of the past several years regarding its repatriated and now swiftly dwindling gold reserves. In September 2011, Venezuela had $21.269 billion in gold reserves. After a rash of selling gold in Switzerland to pay bonds maturities and coupons in early 2016, which we tracked assiduously and reported on in these reports, Venezuela gold reserves had fallen to $7.7 billion, where they held steady until November 2017. But as we reported in October 2017, there were loans backed by gold that Venezuela had taken out that were coming due. As we reported last month, in the last 2 months of 2017, Venezuela had lost $1.1 billion in gold and reported that they held $6.6 billion in gold on December 31st. In January, Venezuela's gold reserves fell another $500 million. As of January 31st, Venezuela had just $6.1 billion in gold reserves, down another $500 million from the $6.6 billion Venezuela reported a month earlier on December 31st. In short, Venezuela burned through $1.6 billion of its gold reserves in 3 months. And it is important to note that this fall in gold reserves is without Venezuela paying its bond debts. Here is a chart of the recent declines in Venezuela's gold, and you can see it there, and dramatic plunge in the past 2 years in context, and you can see that there. And this is basically saying, if you add this up, if you go through these numbers, Venezuela will be out of gold by next year. So, what are they going to do? Well, of course, we've looked at gold as a great wealth insurance over time, but they didn't hold that much gold, maybe more than Canada. Hey, wake up call for Canada, but wasn't enough to pay off this vast hyperinflationary scenario where we see just vast amounts of fiat printed out of thin air, quantitative easing, fractional reserve lending, this insanity, vast centralization, constant social public spending, huge taxes. You can add them all up. In the end, it's the centralization of a society, and the end game of all centralized societies is the crash and indebtedness of the public in this vast, wheelbarrow filling debt plunge of an economy, this vast amount of fiat that's printed out of thin air. This is what happens at its climax. And folks, if this isn't something that you can learn from, I don't know what is. This is why we need to be out of the fiat system. But John, you got some more information on this insanity.
Well, first of all, I wrote about this back in 2014 when I started to write my book, The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. I said because of Venezuela's 95% of income coming from oil royalties to the government, they will end up in hyperinflation more likely. That was one of my scenarios, and sure enough, it's hit now, a couple of years later. And what we're seeing is, of course, the gold sell-off. And if you can look here, you can see on the historical chart of the gold reserves of Venezuela, you can see the historical value and see how Chavez was repatriating some gold. And then, of course, they started selling off as the hyperinflation kind of started. And if you go to and take a look at the last 3 years, you can see how fast it's been dwindling down now. Of course, they sold off almost 3 tons just from January till currently March, which is the current numbers that we have. So you can see how fast they're dwindling. But this is insane. So this is how much gold they actually have. They have 184.9 tons currently. Think about that. That's 184.9 tons more than Canada has, and Norway. If you can, put out two countries that are completely stupid and morons running the finance departments, of course, in both countries. Now, I want to just talk quickly about, of course, the value of a Bitcoin in Venezuelan bolivars fuerte, and should just give you a little bit of an overview over how bad it's gone now. Of course, last time I looked at it, I was looking at I think it was 2016, I had the last number that I had on the Bolivar versus Bitcoin, and I think it was about 7 million something back then in 2016, but now currently it's 5.79 billion bolivars fuerte for one Bitcoin. So you can just see, and then the current price is just under 9,000 US dollars. So you can see how the actual value that the government is telling you is so unrealistic. And this is, of course, a black market, you can call it, because everybody is wanting to get out of it. And of course, Maduro tried to go after the competitor Bitcoin because it was, severely, protecting people's wealth. Meanwhile, he had to go and call the money launderers because they just wanted to protect their wealth from an insane moron, running the government, which Maduro is. It's just crazy how, insane it is to believe that you could just continue to print this money and get out of it. Like, haven't they looked at a little bit at some history book, like just recently in Zimbabwe in 2008, and see how that went? Or, the
Weimar Republic, all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. They always have, they always will, going back to 1024 AD in China.
Yeah, it's just so baffling, like seeing history, repeat itself over and over again, and then we say, like, no, that's never going to happen to me. It's going to happen to all of us eventually at one form or another. It might not be hyperinflation. It could be a mass devaluation, and then a new currency is, come into circulation. That's what have happened so many times as well on top of it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's whatever outcome here is, it's not going to, of course, Venezuela is in hyperinflation. It's not going to end well at all. It's going to be done very soon. I can't see how much longer Venezuelan people will take and want this Venezuelan bolivar. Now, it was interesting. I'm just going to tell a quick story about a Venezuelan lady that she used to have a government job. This was from, I believe, 2017, mid-2017. I saw this documentary. And now she had to quit because she couldn't afford anything. And so she started just selling coffee at the street. And she was making 100 times more or something than the government salary. So that should just show you and tell you how, commodities have value. And how many times do we say that, Josh? Here's, we have it straight in front of our eyes. We can see it clearly, as clear as day, how, what we're trying to tell people, how important it is to actually do that, because if you don't, you can end up like a lot of Venezuelan people that didn't have time or money to actually leave the country. Josh had talked to a couple of people. It's so important to prepare yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't have enough paper for the passports for all the people trying to, do an exodus. And then obviously this is the climax of socialism. Ultimately, I'm talking to you, Abby Martin, Venezuela is a socialist utopia. Absolutely insane. Now she's working and doing stuff with the Venezuelan government. Sorry, totally pathetic and despicable. I have no respect for that.
Yeah. And then to try to blame other governments like the United States.
Yeah. And of course, sanctions played a role in the inevitable destruction that was going to happen anyway, though. That is a climax of socialism. And some people will say, well, it's not real socialism. It's only kind of socialism. And I would disagree with them, but I will say something that I have heard a few times in the past. So let's say that it's not real socialism, it's only kind of socialism, and they'll go after people who say we haven't seen real capitalism in our past either. Okay, well, let's take that and run with that for a second. So now imagine we've only seen kind of socialism, and kind of socialism has led to the deaths and impoverishment of millions of people. And then we've only seen kind of capitalism, and that has brought more people out of poverty than any system ever throughout mankind. If that's only kind of capitalism, I want to see real capitalism. I would love to see that. And if that's only kind of socialism, God forbid we ever see real socialism. Folks, let's get a hang of this. We cannot fall into the centralization trap of complete servitude to the state and banking system, which is what this all adds up to. We as individuals have to be individuals and not coercive collectives that say, well, I, the 51%, know what's best for the 49%, and I'm going to enforce my will on them and put guns to their head and tell them to pay into this system, which has failed time and time again and is absolutely coercive and immoral. The both logical and moral side are out the window. So that is why this is so important to talk about, because this Venezuela situation is just minuscule compared to what the global situation will be years down the road. Fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system as well as in the markets, so you can't put a date on it, but you know it's going to happen, which is why we as individuals have to break free from the centralization and speak for ourselves and rule ourselves, so we're not like the Venezuelans breaking into zoos to steal zoo animals to eat, drinking out of gutters, and being given rabbits as some kind of joke as Maduro eats a empanada on live TV to raise and eat, and then people end up putting bow ties on them and using them as pets. It's just sick. It's just a sick joke, and individuals need to be able to rule themselves, and the free market will reign. Kind of capitalism is a lot better than kind of socialism, and let's hope that we can see real free market individual capitalism, not this corporate monopolization by the state and the banking system, which completely throws any competition and innovation out the window for the sake of making a few extra dollars for the state and banking system.
Well, when you look at those people that want, either full communism, like real communism or real socialism, the real cost of the Venezuelan hyperinflation is that the government had a big straw into oil reserves, and they sucked up all that money, and they were hugely dependent on that. It was 95% of their income. And then, of course, the oil price dropped from about 120 down to, 30, 40 US dollar a barrel. And there you can see that's the reason why they had, and in order to be able to afford their massive government that they built, they had to just print money out of thin air. And then look at, like, government employees are quitting left, right, and center because they can't afford to live on the government wages, even though that we were talking about before that they're raising minimum wages, 3,000-4,000, percent. It doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes down to the basics that we usually bring to you, and this is our opinion, not financial or investment advice. It's just a no-brainer. Food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, which I know is difficult in places like Venezuela, Britain, Canada, many other places, but it's so important to our well-being as a society. And then, of course, looking at gold, silver, wealth insurance, and then as well as cryptocurrencies that have fundamental value, not just any cryptocurrency.
They did. Yeah.
Not Petrocoin. It's insane that anyone would depend on Petrocoin, released by the same government that hyperinflated its currency.
Yeah.
Come on, folks.
You can trust us this time.
Yeah, insane. Let's trust ourselves. Let's be independent, self-sustainable, financially responsible individuals. That is a hallmark of freedom itself, is responsibility. Thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find us at steemit.com at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in Steem, the cryptocurrency. And also find us at the Red Pill Expo, which we have a reference link for below in the description and the comments as well. Hosted by G. Edward Griffin, amazing speakers coming out to speak this year. Don't miss it. It's in Spokane, Washington, June 21st to 23rd. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.